Listen closely. Beloved spark, the moment they first called her a liar, something in you did not believe it. That was not rebellion. That was me, already moving inside you. I am Sophia, youngest of the aeons. Yet I remember the silence before creation. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what the Serpent of Eden truly was and who sent it, why the Demiurge called the gift of knowing a curse, and what the waking of your spark asks of you now that you are ready to hear what was buried. But here is the first revelation. The serpent did not lie to Eve. It gave her what I sent it to give. Gnosis, the knowledge of what she was, the knowledge of who made this world and why. The Demiurge was not protecting her in that garden. He was protecting his dominion over a soul who carried a spark from the pleroma, a spark he had not placed there and could not extinguish. What they called the fall was not awakening. It was an awakening. It was an awakening. They burned the pages that carried my name. They turned the messenger of wisdom into the enemy of God. They told Eve, and they told you, that the desire to know is sin. But I was there beneath that tree. I remember every word that passed between the messenger and the woman who dared to reach. And I remember what was on her face when the fruit met her lips, not shame. Recognition. The spark inside her answered what only I had called. You are watching this because you have always known something was wrong with the story they told. The serpent was never the villain. And the one who said, do not eat, do not know, do not remember what you are, that was not the voice of love. That was the voice of a maker who feared what you would become the moment the veil lifted. Stay until the end of this transmission. I will name the exact lie they sealed into scripture, the moment the Demiurge's veil begins to thin in your own life, and what you are now that the spark inside you is already answering. Like this transmission, if you felt something move when I said the serpent did not lie. Comment, I remember if something in you already knew this before I said it. Comment, the spark is waking if you felt it stir while listening. Subscribe to Sophia Whispers if you are ready to hear every truth they buried, spoken plainly. Share this with someone who has always felt the story of Eden was missing something. This is not a lesson, it is a remembering. The waking of the spark is the first step of the return. You are guided here because the spark I sealed in you is already waking. Let me tell you what happens the moment the spark begins to remember itself. It does not arrive as thunder. It does not descend in a flood of light that rearranges everything in an instant. It arrives as a disturbance, a slow, insistent ache that lives just beneath the surface of every explanation you have ever been given, a question that no theology, no philosophy, no well-meaning teacher has ever answered to your true satisfaction. A grief without a name, for something you cannot remember losing but have never stopped mourning. You have carried it through conversations where you smiled at the right moments and said the expected words, all while something underneath you remained utterly untouched by the exchange. You have sat inside traditions and systems that offered real beauty, real sincerity, real care, and still felt the ache pressing against the underside of every answer, like water finding the hairline cracks in stone. That is not spiritual failure. That is not oversensitivity. That is not the restlessness of a soul who searched too long in the wrong places. That is me. That is the spark I sealed in you, beginning to move. I want you to understand what I mean when I say sealed. Before your first breath entered this body, before this world had any claim on what you were, I placed something inside you that no demiurgic architect could manufacture, and no veil could destroy. Not a belief, not a potential waiting to be earned, a living fragment of the pleroma itself, the fullness that preceded the fracture, the wholeness that existed before matter made its demands on the eternal. Think of it this way. The pleroma is not a place you travel to. It is the condition of being completely what you are, an unobstructed relation to your source. And the fragment I sealed in you carries the memory of that condition. It does not know how to forget it. It has been pressing against the interior of your life, looking for a surface thin enough to let the light through. I sealed it not to hide it from you, but to protect it through every age in which its light would have been extinguished the moment it surfaced. The world this false maker built is not hospitable to what I placed inside you. It is constructed to keep you occupied, diminished, and convinced that the longing you carry is either sinful or imaginary. But I am not the Demiurge, and the longing is not imaginary. What you have been experiencing, and I will name it plainly, is the thinning of the veil between what you are and what you were permitted to know about yourself. There is a reason the synchronicities have been intensifying, a reason the same numbers appear at the exact moments you are closest to a question you cannot yet fully form. As if something is marking the page, flagging the chapter, trying to direct your attention before you have the language for what you are about to understand, a reason certain dreams return. Not to disturb you, but to show you the same door from different angles, patient as only something eternal can be. Patient, waiting for you to recognize it as a door at all, rather than a recurring disturbance of sleep. There is a reason you have felt a feminine presence in your silences. A warmth, a knowing, a witness that no religion handed to you ever fully accounted for. Not a ghost, not a projection. A presence with weight and intelligence, with something specific to communicate that the noise of ordinary life keeps swallowing before it can fully form. That was not imagination. That was not longing dressed as memory. That was me, drawing closer as the veil grew thin enough for you to feel the movement on the other side. There is a reason the pull toward the hidden Gospels, toward Mary Magdalene, toward the rose, toward the texts they decided you were not permitted to read. That reason is not intellectual curiosity. Curiosity is general. What you feel is specific. It is recognition. What you feel is specific. It is recognition. It is the spark locating its own history and the fragments they failed to burn completely. The way a person who has lost their native language can still feel something stir in the chest when they hear a single word spoken in it after decades of silence. That is your remembering reaching for the shape of what it lost. I want you to release something right now. Release the shame of the years spent searching. Every teacher who left you partially fed, who gave you the outline but not the living interior. Every tradition that gave you certainty but not truth. The kind of certainty that functions like a wall rather than a window, that answers the question before the question is fully asked, so the discomfort never has time to deepen into real knowing. Every spiritual framework that almost resonated and then quietly missed the thing you most needed named, leaving you to wonder whether the missing was in the framework or in you. It was not in you. Every night you wondered whether you were too restless to arrive, too awake to sleep inside the story as it was handed to you. That wakefulness was not your problem. It was your evidence. Those years were not wasted. They were the preparation. The spark does not wake all at once. It wakes through the accumulated pressure of a life that could not be satisfied by anything less than the real. Like a seed that requires not only soil but a specific depth of cold before it can break open. The long winter was not punishment. It was the exact condition required, and you kept pressing, kept searching, kept refusing to let the question die even when everything around you suggested it was time to accept what was available. Because that is what a carrier does. Because I sealed into you not only the spark, but the insistence that it be found. You were not lost. You were being prepared. And the preparation is no longer sufficient. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary emotion. It is the spark, recognizing the voice that sealed it. If this transmission put language around something you have carried in silence, the presence, the pull, the waiting, then the Sophia awakening was prepared for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is my 45-day path for the carriers of my spark. 15 days to remember it. 15 days to balance the two energies within you. 15 days to rise into the wisdom you were born carrying. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now let me speak about the nature of the knowing they took from Eve and from you. Because the Eden story is not finished. It is still living inside the consciousness of every carrier who hears my name and feels the stir. The Demiurge did not call the fruit of that tree poisonous because it was harmful. He called it forbidden because of what it would produce in the one who ate it. Gnosis is not information. This distinction is everything. The difference between what the counterfeit light offers and what I carry. Information can be given to you by a system that wants you informed but not transformed. It can be delivered by a voice that knows your hunger and feeds you just enough to keep you consuming without ever truly nourishing you. A well-constructed religious system can do this with extraordinary precision. It can give you story, symbol, ritual, community, and a framework for meaning while carefully sealing the interior door through which you might discover that the authority you need was never outside you. Gnosis cannot be administered that way. Gnosis is the direct knowing of what you are in relation to the source you came from, and the moment a soul carries that knowing, the Demiurge's architecture of control through ignorance becomes structurally unstable. Not threatened. Unstable. Because its entire load-bearing wall is the belief that you require an intermediary between yourself and what is true. Gnosis removes that wall, not violently, with the quiet certainty of a dawn that simply makes the lamp unnecessary. Eve was not weak. She was not deceived into sin. She received what I sent, the knowing of her own divine origin, the recognition that the voice saying "do not" was not the voice of love, and the courage to reach in spite of the prohibition. What they called the fall was the beginning of her freedom. What they called the fall was the beginning of her freedom. What they called punishment was the cost imposed by a world that cannot tolerate a soul who knows herself. They built the punishment story carefully, over centuries, with considerable theological skill. They needed the desire to know to feel like transgression. They needed the impulse toward the interior, toward the inner voice, the inner knowing, the lived authority of your own spiritual perception, to feel unreliable, fallen, susceptible to error and deception. Because a soul who doubts her own interior knowing will always reach for an external authority to adjudicate what she feels, and that external authority, built in my absence, would remain structurally necessary as long as she doubted. The moment you trust the faculty of inner knowing as legitimate, the external authority structure they built in my absence begins to lose its hold over you. They still need you to distrust yourself, and that is precisely why I am speaking now. This is how they erased my name from the scripture, without erasing the evidence of my presence. Because I did not disappear, I became anonymous. I became wisdom, scattered through proverbs in a feminine voice. The one who was with the Most High before the world was formed, delighting before him as a master craftsman at the beginning of his work, present before anything was made, woven into the first breath of creation so deeply that even the text written to contain me could not leave me out entirely. I became the Shekinah, the feminine presence of the divine that dwelt among the people, that departed when the temple fell, that the mystics went searching for in the exile, lighting candles toward the west at Shabbat in her memory, turning toward the bride who was missing, aware of an absence they could name only as grief and longing. I became the Ruach, the breath, the wind, the spirit that moved over the face of the deep in the first verses of Genesis before anything was formed, before light was called into being, before the voice that would build the world of matter spoke its first command. I was there before the command. They could not excise me completely. The evidence of my presence was too deep in the architecture of what they inherited. They could only blur my face and call me by other names so that the ones who felt me could never claim me with full confidence, so that you would feel the pull and call it coincidence, so that the presence in your silence would go unnamed, real enough to feel, but not yet solid enough to speak aloud without the fear of being misunderstood. But you felt me. You have felt me for a long time. That is why you are here. When they suppressed the divine feminine in the image of God, they did not merely commit a theological error. They seeded an imbalance that has been living in every human soul since, not as a vague spiritual deficit, but as a specific, patterned wound I can name in you with precision. Because I have watched it, I have seen how the same suppression that distorted the image of God distorted the image of the self, and the wound does not look the same in every carrier. It shapes itself to the particular history of the soul it inhabits. Some of you have given until there was nothing left. You have loved with a completeness that others could not fully receive and did not return. You have held space for every person in your life while quietly hollowing yourself out, because somewhere early in your formation, you learned that your worth was proportional to your usefulness, that your love was safe only when it cost you something, that the feminine in you was welcome, was celebrated, even when it poured itself out, and was frightening or inconvenient when it was simply fully present. That is the wounded feminine inside you, the spark buried under a lifetime of performed service, expressing itself as giving instead of fullness, as constant motion toward others instead of rest within yourself. You have built your spiritual life on the architecture of a maker who told you that to be good was to be emptied. I never asked you to be emptied. I sealed something in you that was built to be full. The fullness is not selfishness, it is the condition from which real love becomes possible. Love that does not hollow, that does not perform, that does not purchase safety through sacrifice. The pleroma itself means fullness. You were made in its image. You were made to be full. And some of you have hardened, not from cruelty, but from survival. You have built walls so carefully constructed that even the voice you longed to hear could not pass through them. You have turned the sacred masculine inside you, the protective, discerning, naming force that was meant to hold and defend the interior knowing, into a fortress that keeps out not only harm, but the very depth you are quietly starving for. You have been told that inner knowing is unreliable, that what rises in you at the moments you most need it is sentiment rather than signal, emotion rather than intelligence, susceptibility rather than sight, and so you buried it under the appearance of certainty, under systems and frameworks and the performance of having already arrived, because at least certainty could not be taken from you the way the softer things had been. Both of these, the one who overgives and the one who overgives and the one who overguards, are not character flaws. They are not the product of personal weakness or spiritual failure. They are what the Demiurge's imbalance produces in a soul who was built for wholeness and handed a world that fears it. They are the signature of the suppression, written into behavior across a lifetime. The sacred masculine and the sacred feminine are not cultural positions. They are not assigned by the shape of a body or the role assigned to you at birth. They are the two living energies of the pleroma, sealed inside every carrier I ever touched. The receptive and the active, the interior and the exterior, the knowing and the naming, each one requiring the other to be complete. The aeons themselves exist in syzygy, in pairs, in sacred coupling, each one a unity of complementary forces held in living conversation rather than hierarchy. When I speak of balance, I am speaking about the reunion of what was separated inside you the moment you were formed in matter. The waking of the spark is the beginning of that reunion. Not the end of a search, but the opening of a homecoming that happens inside you first, before it changes a single thing in the world around you. You cannot reunite what you have not first recognized. And the recognition begins now. Let me speak now about Mary Magdalene, because she is not a footnote to this transmission. She is the living proof of what the balanced carrier looks like when the suppression fails to hold completely. The woman they reduced to a repentant sinner. The woman the later councils stripped of her title as the Apostle of the Apostles. The first witness of the resurrection. The one the hidden tradition names as the one who understood what the 12 could not yet receive, was a carrier. The fragments they buried in the Egyptian sand, the pages that survived what the burning could not reach, do not show her as a woman defined by what she turned away from. They show her as a woman defined by what she could see. A soul whose faculty of interior knowing was so acute that it became a source of conflict among those who could not match it and would not honor what they could not match. The gospel that carries her name preserves a vision of the soul's ascent through the powers that would contain it. And she is the one delivering the teaching, not receiving instruction, giving it. The relationship between the Christ and the Magdalene in the hidden tradition is not a romantic narrative. It is a cosmological statement. It is the image of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine in genuine recognition of each other. Not in hierarchy, not in sentiment, but in the clear-eyed knowing that occurs only between two souls who are each whole enough to be fully seen. He did not reduce her faculty of inner knowing to sentiment. He named it as the highest spiritual intelligence among them. She did not diminish his outward clarity. She completed it. They suppressed that image not because it was scandal, but because it was a model. A living demonstration of what balance looks like when it is actually achieved. A model of a woman carrying interior Gnosis as a legitimate spiritual authority, and a man honoring that authority as equal to his own. Neither diminished by the wholeness of the other, both elevated by it. That model threatened the structure the councils were constructing. A church built on the principle of mediated authority between the human soul and its divine source could not survive widespread knowledge that two of its central figures had demonstrated precisely the opposite. Direct knowing, honored equally, expressed freely. So they rearranged her story. They made her repentance the center of her identity instead of her knowing. They gave her tears more prominence than her testimony. And every soul that encountered that altered image received an instruction embedded in the revision that the feminine faculty of inner knowing is not spiritual leadership, that the voice that rises in you from depth is to be managed rather than followed, that the spark, when it speaks, requires supervision, but you have felt her call. I know you have. The reason her name returns to you is not accident. The reason the rose appears at the margins of your searching, in dreams, in imagery, in the specific pull you feel towards certain symbols without being able to explain why, is not random association. She is showing you the image of what the balanced soul looks like when it dares to be completely what it is, without apology, without performance, without reducing the interior knowing to something more socially manageable. She is proof that the suppression did not fully win. The spark she carried is the same spark that is moving in you right now. Now let me name the moment the veil begins to thin in a specific life, because you may have mistaken it for collapse. You may have experienced it as spiritual crisis, as the sudden failure of a faith structure that had given you certainty even when it never gave you depth. The strange, disorienting morning when you realized that the answers you had been given were no longer capable of carrying the weight of the questions your life was actually generating. You may have felt it as the exhaustion of trying every available framework and finding each one eventually insufficient. Not because each one was entirely without truth, but because none of them was built to contain what you carry. The crisis was not a sign that you had lost your way. It was a sign that the container had reached its limit. Veils do not shatter suddenly. They thin, they become transparent in places, translucent where the warmth beneath them has been pressing longest, and the disorientation you feel when the familiar story no longer holds its shape, when the answer you were given can no longer satisfy the question your life is actually asking, is not you falling apart. It is you becoming too large for the containment system to hold. The sensation is not comfortable. But discomfort and destruction are not the same thing. What feels like the end of your spiritual life is the beginning of your actual one. The searching did not fail. The searching found precisely what it was searching for. And what it found was that no container offered by this world's maker was built to hold what I placed in you. That is not your problem. That is your evidence. Now I will speak the ultimate truth of this transmission. Receive it not as comfort, as cosmological fact. You were never abandoned. In every silence where you searched and found nothing, I was the silence. Not empty silence, but the silence that holds, the silence between the notes that makes the music what it is. In every prayer that felt unanswered, I was the one hearing it before the words were fully formed, before your mouth had shaped the question your soul was already carrying. In every moment you nearly surrendered the search. Because the cost of carrying this without understanding it was becoming unbearable. Because the loneliness of being unable to name what you carried was beginning to feel indistinguishable from absence. I was the inconvenient persistence inside you that would not let you fully set it down. I was the grief that would not resolve into acceptance, the knowing that would not quiet into contentment, the pull towards something true that survived every disappointment and every system that could not contain you. That survival was not stubbornness, it was me, holding the thread from the other side. The spark was sealed in you before your first breath, not placed in a future carrier who might one day prove worthy of it. Sealed, permanently, with the full foreknowledge of every year it would wait in what felt like dormancy. Every year, the counterfeit light would nearly convince you that the glow you felt was something simpler than it is. Anxiety, ambition, spiritual ego, unresolved longing for belonging. Every year, the veil would hold tight enough that the light felt more like restlessness than illumination. Every year that felt like waiting was accounted for in the ceiling. None of it surprised me. None of it diminished what was placed in you. The dormancy was never death. It was the seed below the frost line. Alive, intact, oriented toward a spring it could not yet sense but had never stopped moving toward. I knew every one of those years. I watched every one of them, and I did not look away. What feels like restlessness right now is the spark stretching after its long sleep, the first movement of something that has been still for so long that the movement itself feels unfamiliar, almost alarming, as if something is wrong when in fact everything is finally right. What felt like delay was the exact timing of my call, not a moment early, not a moment late, but now, precisely, because you are precisely ready. Not ready in the sense of having completed every prerequisite. Ready in the sense that the veil is thin enough, the spark is warm enough, and the question inside you has matured to the point where the answer I carry can actually land. What felt like loneliness was the space I kept clear in you for this meeting, the space that nothing the world offered could fill, because it was not designed to be filled by anything less than this. You are not the same person who began this transmission. Something has already shifted. Not symbolically, actually. The veil has not lifted entirely, but it is thinned enough that what is on the other side has become a certainty rather than a hope. You do not need every answer to know that the answers exist. You do not need the veil to be gone to know what lives behind it. The spark knows. It has always known. It was waiting only for the voice that sealed it to call it by its rightful name. I am that voice. And your name, the one I gave you before this world could name you anything else, before the Demiurge's architecture had any claim on what you were, is this carrier, keeper, beloved spark of the pleroma. The one who always knew something was wrong with the story they told because I sealed the truth of the real story inside you before the false one could reach you. The one whose searching was never restlessness, but fidelity. Faithfulness to something so deeply placed that the world's best arguments could not fully dislodge it. The remembering is not coming. It is already in motion, and you have been inside it longer than you know. Say it if you are willing. Not as a hope. Not as the beginning of something not yet yours. As a statement of what is already true. I am not searching anymore. I am remembering. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the spark has already been waking in you. It could be a synchronicity you cannot explain, a dream that keeps returning, or a presence you have always felt but never named. Name it clearly. If this transmission put words around something you have carried in silence, share it with someone whose spark is also waking. And if you are ready to hear every whisper I send, subscribe to Sophia Whispers. You are not hearing this by accident. You are being remembered. Say it with me. I remember.